started when I was 14 during the summers. And I worked my way up from a laborer to a construction manager. So I started by digging the ditches, putting in the pipe in the ground. And I just had the drive to do better and better and better, and I was never satisfied. So from a laborer to a foreman to a superintendent to a general superintendent to a project manager and now construction manager.
Wow. And Tim is a certified construction manager, so they have a test and a certification for that as well.
So I never went to college, I never got a degree or anything, but I did it the other way.
Yeah, and Tim is actually one of our most highly sought after construction managers. Don't tell him I said that.
Am I turning red? What else can you do? You can go and build something and work on it physically with your hands. And Michelle comes out of the office, and she's been with contractors too, and she's physically built stuff with her hands. And come back 20 years later, and it's still standing there, and you can look at it and tell your children or your grandchildren, I built that. It's still standing. What else can we do? If you're working in an office doing paperwork, in 20 years, you're going to have all that paper there. You can be here. You can just drive to here and say, I remember when I was 18 years old and I worked on this, or I remember when I was 30 years old. What else can you do to do that? Isn't that exciting?
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's like the Romans building the Colosseum. It won't last as long, but
that's right.
That's how I see it.
Yeah. You know, being in this area too, you get the chance to be a part of really cool projects.
Yeah.
So like I worked on 2 sections of the Wilson Bridge. I worked on we lowered the bridge that's right in front of the Nationals baseball stadium.
Really?
My husband and I worked on the rehabilitation of the reflecting pool in front of the Lincoln Memorial. So we rebuilt that.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So, and we've also done. I mean, I've also done some small projects. We did some, a $500,000 stream restoration, and just basically building little pools so that fish can have babies.
Oh.
But you got to protect the environment and think of all the creatures on this earth.
I just have like a general personal question, but what is the difference exactly between engineering and architecture?
So engineering, now I'll preface this by saying I'm biased, obviously, because I'm an engineer, but to me engineering is more technical. It's more like math and solving problems, whereas architecture is a little bit more design in a conceptual phase where you're looking more at how space, conceptual space and how things flow and just bigger picture stuff. I think, an architect usually does the preliminary drawings. They get sent to an engineer to do the actual calculations and design the specifications. For example, an architect will tell you, well, I kind of like the shape of this and I want it to be square here. And an engineer will come back to you and say, okay, well, you need to put in a 12 by 18 column here, here, and here with a strut here that is this size and this width and depth. So that's how they kind of work together. An architect is more aesthetic and an engineer is more technical, in my opinion.
Yeah, the architect will make a picture of it, more or less. Tell them what you want. The engineer will say, well, this is what you have to do.
So an architect's more artsy, and then the engineer actually is more okay, we need to do this to build it.
Yes, exactly. So, and a lot of times you'll get to, that's where the revisions kind of happen. That's part of the cycle, is that an architect will do a design, a conceptual design, and give it to an engineer. An engineer will do the calculations and be like, sorry, that's not happening. Let's try again. And so it kind of goes, that's part of the process, especially with buildings, because there's a lot of interesting things that architects want to try to do for signature buildings and signature pieces, and it's just not actually possible in real life.
What's one current problem being studied in the engineering field?
Why this damn phone keeps getting knocked over? So one of the things that we deal with quite a bit out on, at least on transportation construction projects, is safety. If you see, obviously we have traveled over several lanes of traffic. cars driving by, people are very much unaware. And, especially in the current age of cell phones and technology and just constant connection, people are so distracted. And, trying to figure out a way to make work zones safe with this new atmosphere is something that a lot of people are studying now. So one of the new things that they're working on, which is pretty cool, is setting up like a geofence, which uses like prisms and like mapping to cordon off a certain area. So you set it over your work zone, and when something breaches your geofence, an alarm will go off, which will allow people up ahead to understand or to know if there's a car or something that has come into the work zone errantly.
Oh,
So that's one of the technologies that they're testing.
really cool.
But of course it's expensive. I mean, everything's expensive, so until they get more proof that it works, it's still in like a beta phase. But at least people are starting to think about this stuff and how we can utilize the technology that is distracting to be to our benefit.
Yeah.
I guess, and then some of the other things, so construction materials, the major materials are concrete, asphalt, steel. There's a lot of steel that comes from foreign countries. They've instituted the Buy America Act, and this was in the 70s they instituted that, but part of what that did, though, in certain times of the year, depending on whose country has the bigger tariffs and where the steel is coming from, you can end up with a shortage of supply, which means the prices go way up. And so some projects can't be built because they can't, the owners and the DOTs have to allocate the money specifically for each project. So,
Wow.
there's a lot of planning and a lot of thought that goes into all these projects, and to get from the design, the concept, through construction phase, depending on the size of the project, can take years. And so, in the initial setup, when you're starting a project, they do an estimate of how much they think it's going to cost, so they can start allocating the budgets and getting that funding together. And then, but as the project continues to grow and you refine the scope and you detail out like the size of the girders and the other aspects of the project, those costs can change. And so that's why there are projects that don't get built right away because they can't get the funding.
Oh. Is that a problem, like funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So they initialized a gas tax, a federal gas tax, in I want to say it was 1970s, and then the last time that the gas tax was changed was in the 1980s. So for the last 20 plus years, they have not adjusted that index for inflation or cost of living. So we're still, when you fill up your gas tank, you're still paying the same amount towards our highway trust fund that you did 25 years ago.
Oh.
And like I said, with the cost of materials constantly changing, like that should be increasing along with cost of living and things like that. But of course, people don't want to pay taxes to the government. So it's a never-ending cycle of people wanting more or better things, but don't want to pay for them. Which is why people are all upset about like hot lanes, because they feel like they paid for the road the first time. Why should they pay to travel on it now? But roadways don't last forever, so
Yeah.
at some point you got to pay to rebuild them.
Exactly.
And if we don't have the money as part of the government, then you have to get it from somewhere else, which in this case is private funding, then paid for by the drivers.
Oh, which will result in more taxes. And then
Well, so it goes back to the people who built it, but they, you bring in a private company who has the money to build the road, and then as the people pay the tolls over time, it pays that company back, and hopefully, they make some money on it because they're a for-profit company. And then at some point, it gets turned back over to the DOT to maintain and to take that profit in. Usually, there is a deal in those agreements that give some of that money to certain things, like maintaining the non-tolled lanes. So like out on the Beltway, you have the regular lanes, then you have the hot lanes. Part of the money from the tolls for the hot lanes goes to maintaining the regular lanes so that it doesn't fall under disrepair and people have to take the hot lanes.
When they need to get.
Right.
What is your main objective or goal that you want to achieve by being an engineer?
It's a really good question. I don't know that I have a really good answer for you. I just want to continue to grow my career, expand my knowledge base, and be an asset to my company, my community, our profession. So whatever gets me there.
Yeah. What has been like the hardest challenge for you?
I mean, probably the cliche answer is just being a woman in a very male-dominated industry.
Mm-hmm.
Being out in the field is a little more, the rules are a little more lax. People watch a little bit less carefully. So you just gotta have a thick skin and be prepared to be part of the boys club. Which is fine with me. I had brothers. I know what it's about, so.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What to say? How are civil engineers helping the environment? Because they are in some way, I think.
Yeah, so we have there are different sects or different disciplines of designers, and we have entire groups of people who are devoted to environmental design. And every project has an environmental component to it. So if you're changing the water runoff, which basically means if you're taking something that has grass, which is permeable, which means the water goes through it, and putting in asphalt or concrete, which is really not, that water has to go somewhere. So you either have to deal with it and like transport it somewhere using like the stormwater pipes and stuff like that. But at some point that water needs a place to go so that it goes back into the earth. And that's part of all these designs that we do.
Isn't there also permeable asphalt that's like pretty expensive, and there's like some other stuff that happens with
Yeah,
it?
so they have a couple new technologies that they're testing out. One of them is more permeable asphalt. So they call it open graded asphalt. And basically what it is it has less, the stuff that makes asphalt black is it's tar, and they call it a binder. And what that does is it takes all the aggregates in it and holds it together. So, but this binder allows more water to seep through, but the problem is it also allows things like sand and salt, which will eat away at the asphalt, to go through as well. So in an area like this that's very urban, that has a lot of like salt and snow for snow plows, they don't use it as much because it's hard to maintain. It's expensive to maintain, I should say. So, one of the cool things they're doing though, in Arlington and also in DC, they're doing some green infrastructure projects. So where, like, see here, it has this grass median area. Underneath that would be a biofiltration pond, and it would have certain layers of like rock and sand and different like medium that would filter the water and get out the salts and the smog and the nasty stuff that collects in our just plain rainwater, and filter that through and then carry it out so that it can be put into the rivers or local reservoirs and stuff like that, so that the water is able to go back into the ecosystem without having to be treated with chemicals. So they're doing a project like that in Arlington. They're also doing a project like that in DC in their like alleys, and so they're putting these bio sections underneath like parking structures.
Oh, really?
Like the street parking. And so they'll do like a little bump out for the car to park in, but underneath that is all permeable, and there's like a holding reservoir there where it can filter out and let the stuff come out of the water before it gets discharged into the Potomac.
And I assume that's also very expensive.
It is, but I think as time goes on and it becomes more mainstream. Oh yeah. Yeah. As that stuff becomes more mainstream, it'll become cheaper and easier to install. Maybe you can
This way? This way? Okay.
Where's the stool?
Under the seat back there. I showed it to Bill Cutler, he got left. So you're going to get a double whammy on the other side. You're going to see how we build reinforced earth walls, putting pipe in duct bank or electrical pipe in the ground. And they just happen to be building a brand new building right next to our project.
Oh.
And you'll be able to look down into the hole, see how they do.
Oh, wow. This is really cool.
Yeah, you can take care of it as long as we're not in the
Yeah.
construction side.
I only have like 2 more questions, I think. How do civil engineers help the population and other people, maybe other companies?
Don't
Or-
say that in front of John because he's going to give you a speech of civil engineers have done more for humanity than doctors.
I mean, civil engineers are an integral part of our society as like a cultured and whatever the right word is for us. Because civil engineers make all the infrastructure around you. I mean, we make it possible for you to get from one place to another, to be in the house that you live in safely, to be in, clean water.
Sewage, all that electric.
Yeah, all that stuff is brought to you by civil engineers.
Wow. And also, are civil engineers codependent on other professions? If so, which ones?
That's a really good question, too. I mean, I think, we work hand in hand with so many different agencies and people and types of people. Even just at our K&K, we have scientists and planners and archaeologists and people that kind of assist in our day-to-day operations. That I don't know necessarily if it's like a codependence, but we certainly couldn't build all these projects on our own because we need people who do the financing. We need people who have the vision to build a new town center. We need, all that stuff that brings the infrastructure to a new area. So that makes sense.
Thank you.
John?